this is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. The Olympics are over, but I've got a gold medal worthy free program that you can check out every weeknight. And good news, you're already tuned in. Unless you've lived under a rock for the last 10 years or so, odds are you've at least seen or heard about something based on a comic book.
Avengers! Assemble.
Movie adaptations of comic books, from the Marvel Cinematic Universe to constant reboots of Batman and Superman, dominate at the box office. If you're a fan, you probably come to those movies or the original comics as an escape from the world, from politics, and some of the more contentious debates over social issues. But when you look a little closer, comic books and graphic novels have historically been action-packed with deep political and social commentary, and that might be why they've been caught up in recent debates over what school children can and can't read. In Texas, a legislator who proposed banning over 800 books from school libraries included a graphic novel version of Shirley Jackson's short story, The Lottery, on the banned list. Parents and legislators cite a range of reasons for proposing the bans in the state or local school districts, but books like The Lottery and the graphic novel version of the books The Handmaid's Tale and Speak, which is about a high school student's sexual assault, delve into societal issues like gender and tradition. And in Tennessee, the McMinn County School Board voted to remove mouse from the 8th grade curriculum. They raised issues over some language and nudity, but the work is a deep allegory about the Holocaust and has been used in curriculums across the country to teach Holocaust history. Christina Knope is a professor at the State University of New York at Cortland, whose work analyzes what pop culture says about history and politics. Christina told us graphic novels can be targeted for bans more often because of a common misconception.
I often encounter a lot of people who are like, buy comics. I mean, those are kids' books. Like, no, really, if you read them, they're not. And I think that conception is part of why, whether it's Mouse or anything else, gets a much stronger reaction.
Now, you may not have heard of a graphic novel like Mouse before, but it has more in common with iconic superhero comics than just paneled illustrations. As diehard fans know, comics, including comics read by kids worldwide for decades, have a long history of deep political and social commentary. Superman has waded into political issues several times throughout the years. Some of the earliest issues of the comics feature him fighting against powerful interests in the community, including slumlords and corrupt orphanage administrators. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man has long been a working-class hero, with Peter Parker often bouncing between jobs as a delivery man and part-time photographer, while hanging on at the margins of society when he's not rocking the Spider-Man suit. Captain America was created by two Jewish artists in the lead-up to the US entry into World War II, at a time when US opposition to Nazi Germany wasn't a sure thing. Anti-Semitism and Nazism had considerable support in the US. Seriously, those last couple pics that look like they're from Nazi Germany, they were taken in New Jersey. The first issue of the Captain America series, published in March of 1941, made a clear political statement, showing Cap punching Adolf Hitler. And co-creator Joe Simon said he was physically threatened after the issue was published. Captain America jumped right into the political debate, and as Anthony Leoy, a professor at the Juilliard School studying the relationship between American literature and other forms of media, points out, it even left its mark on more recent films.
There's this very vibrant memory, right, particularly among comics creators, but also among comics readers, right, of the overtly political nature of Captain America. And of course, that continues into movies like Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is about, obviously, the discovery that the American security state has been infiltrated by fascists.
The character has also been used as a way of tackling issues of race and identity. In 2003, Marvel released a comic series about a black Captain America, Isaiah Bradley, who was experimented on in ways that parallel the Tuskegee syphilis study. The recent Marvel TV series Falcon and the Winter Soldier also deals head-on with questions about race. Anthony Mackie, the actor who plays Falcon, has said the character reflects on the burden of using Captain America's shield and grappling with whether a black man can represent a country that doesn't represent him. All the while, one of the largest comic book producers has been trying to get out of politics. In 2019, Mouse's author Art Spiegelman said Marvel brought him in to write an introduction to a compilation book it was releasing. He said Marvel rejected his introduction because the company was trying to remain apolitical. Spiegelman had compared then-President Donald Trump to Captain America's openly fascist villain, Red Skull. And considering the long political history of comics and graphic novels, Marvel's effort to keep political issues out of comics might have been an outlier. Even if partisan politics are out of bounds in some cases, there's still room for political and social commentary in comics and their adaptations. The X-Men came out in 1963, the same year that police violently responded to protests in Birmingham, Alabama, and the same year Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led the March on Washington. In a time before heroes of color were widespread, X-Men's mutants were created with metaphors about discrimination against minority groups in mind, and has also addressed issues of LGBTQ discrimination. Beyond the most popular comics, graphic novels have offered commentary on social and political issues like immigration. Widely acclaimed works like The Arrival by Sean Tan, the book and film versions of Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, and American-Born Chinese by Jean Luen Yang, now set to be turned into a series for Disney+, all capture social and political dynamics in graphic novel form, and all three have won numerous awards, not just in comics categories, but for their success as works of literature. Now, this all has come as we've seen a big shift in the perception of comic books and graphic novels. They have steadily become a bigger and bigger part of the cultural mainstream. Newsy's Casey Mendoza flips through why and how that's become the case.
As comic book movies made their way back onto the big screen last year, comic books themselves also saw a huge growth. Sales for adult graphic novels more than doubled in 2021, and one publisher said it was their biggest year ever.
While television production kind of shut down, the rise in reading in books and comics actually increased.
That's international comic book historian Jessica Sang. She credits the growing popularity of graphic novels to the pandemic, as well as the rise of comic book writers and artists from all over the world.
There's great comics from South America, Africa, Australia, India. I would love for more of a global love of it.
The top-selling graphic novel from the beginning of 2021 was a volume of the Japanese superhero series My Hero Academia, which was also one of the most in-demand animes of the year. Other experts say anime is one of the driving forces behind the growing popularity of graphic novels, and specifically manga from Japan. That subgenre of graphic novel saw a growth of 171% in 2021 compared to 2020, and that amounts to a little more than 24 million books sold last year.
We're on the second or third generation of people who read manga in English.
Comic book expert Deb Aoki grew up reading manga during a time when it was considered a niche genre. She says the market in the US has grown over the past couple decades, allowing more titles from Japan to be translated to English.
There's manga about food, there's manga about hockey. We've always only gotten the very tippy top of the iceberg what Japan produces, but we're starting to get more variety.
That growing variety of titles is especially exciting for longtime fans of graphic novels, but it's also good news for bookstores. No one knows that better than James Daunt, the CEO of Barnes & Noble.
The rise of an increasing popularity of manga and graphic novels and things. So it's bringing our stores are just full of young people, and that's exactly the demographic that you want in your stores.
Some of this year's most anticipated graphic novels, including Fine, a comic about gender, and The High Desert, Black Punk Nowhere, are throwing big spotlights on diversity. Casey Mendoza, Newsy.
So we've touched on it at a couple points during this conversation, but as comic books and graphic novels become a bigger and bigger part of mainstream culture, there's also a growing effort to make the stories they tell look more like America writ large. A big part of that is representation. A lot of the recent political and social commentary we've seen in the genre comes as a more diverse group of authors and illustrators are creating the stories. One of those creators joins us now. Caden Phoenix is an indie comic book artist and creator of A la Brava, a rare comic book series with an all-Latina group of superheroes. They fight a range of real-world issues, including human trafficking, refugee crises, and violence against women. Caden, thank you so much for joining us here on In the Loop. Real quick, my first question, Which one of your superheroes do you most identify with on a daily basis? Are you more of a Jalisco or a Bandita? I'm trying to figure out which one really speaks to my personality. Which one really speaks to you on a daily basis?
It's such a hard question, such a hard answer, Alan. Honestly, I get asked that so much, and I like to say I'm a little bit of all of them, yes, and like, you know, like they're all Latinas, they're all, you know, strong in their own way. Then you were saying all social justice issues, etc. I choose Jalisco because that one is my dancer, Blade's kind of her dress. She takes on the femicide. That is not any of me, but it has to do with my family, has a lot of familial ties to me. There's little things of my family that is in there, and so that one for me is the strongest. I am absolutely not a superhero in any right, but I'm proud to be behind it.
Some would beg to differ. You know, these stories are important. Representation matters, and these stories are important. You know, you were at San Diego Comic-Con Special Edition in December and moderated a panel on Latina representation in the comic book industry. How have you seen representation both behind the scenes and inside comics themselves broaden out the audience for comics as a genre?
I've seen it grown. I didn't grow up with comics, to be honest with you, so I'm not like you in that sense. I grew up with film. I'm a millennial. So I had all the Disney princesses and then also the blockbuster films. So, you know, anything Sigourney Weaver, anything Tina Davis, right? We had really great female figures. As to those for Latina, no, not really. You know, we didn't really get much, honestly. But it's changed in that there's people like me, there's people on the independent side that are working towards like, well, why don't we exist? We do exist, and we exist positively. You know, like we go to college, we're not these, you know, nauticals, we're not drug traffickers, we're not all these horrible things that we see left and right, whether it's in TV or film or media. Like we are humans, because that's the way I've always seen my family, that's the way I've seen my community, that's the way I see you and everyone else. And so I think that is the change, right? It's just literally we exist is the part one of it. And then here's our story through our eyes as well.
We exist and we're not a monolith. I feel like that's a pretty big theme to touch on when covering nuances of different communities. We've been talking about how comic books lend themselves to commentary on political and social issues, and we mentioned earlier that your A la Brava series tackles some real-world issues. How did you fold some of those into building villains for your heroines to fight?
I literally just was like, okay, what gets me mad? And it was so easy. It was like, femicide gets me mad. Okay, so someone has to control the femicide, be in charge of the femicide. And so that's how I created my villain on literally every one of them. What else gets me mad? Domestic violence. So someone that's in charge of a group that does, you know, that abuses the females. Great, that's a bandita. And it's and then you create the story around it. But like I have my superhero, I had the villain, and what the social justice issue is that she's going to tackle. You know, because us as females, we don't get justice. That's literally the truth of it. Like my superheroes, their powers are all grounded. Why? Because these are real world issues. You know, because here, even in this real world, we do not get our justice, unfortunately.
How much of an opportunity do you see for your work to comment on or represent real world political and cultural fights?
I learned that storytelling is a reflection of democracy, right? And so this is my story saying we don't get our justice. And so 100% of it, everything that I write is from the truth. It's not like I need an alien to come down and save us or save the town of Metropolis every single time. I don't need some crazy guy from the asylum, you know, to wreak havoc on Gotham. I've seen it. I need a girl to be saved. It's really just that simple. And so my place comes from truth, and I do use Latinas, but honestly, it can be anyone, but I do use Latinas, right? Because like I was saying, why can't a Latina save a person? Why can't a Latina save her mom that's being stolen? You know, little simple things. Why can't they save the school from a shooter? You know, and that's Loquita. These are our truths. These are our everyday things that we have to deal with.
Caden Phoenix is an indie comic book artist and creator of A la Brava, a comic book series with an all-Latina group of superheroes. Caden, thank you so much for joining us on ITL.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.